Otherwise, welcome to our Western Washington K-12 tug. I think the last time we met was in January. It doesn't seem like it's been that long ago, but time seems to fly by these days. So here we are, another 3 months has gone by. The agenda for today is to do welcome and introductions, and then we'll have Coleman doing a 2021.1 overview for us so we can see some of the new features that are available in the latest release from Tableau. And then we have some time for just some group discussion based on some topics of interest that came up last time. Auburn and Alex have agreed to present their COVID dashboard in Auburn. If anybody else wants to do that at that time, that'd be great, and we'll be able to ask questions and do all that. Some of the other things that came up were data prep and dashboard design. And another thing that has been top of mind for my team has been thinking about reflecting on the year and any surveys that might be happening and how we get information to understand what this last year looked like. Then we'll spend a little time talking about next steps when we want to meet again and all of that. So to get started, we have a Menti, like last time if you were here. There's a web address and a code at the bottom. And just to do some quick introductions, your name, district title, and then the prompt here is, what is one question you've been asked or are anticipating now that more students are back in school? So just to get a sense of what the work is looking like more recently, given changes. Give you a little bit of time with that code and then pull up so we can see the results as they're coming in. We have some responses starting to come in here. How many of our students will be participating in summer recovery services? So
I forgot to put my name, sorry.
Somebody's thinking about that. How are in-person hybrid students doing compared to remote only students?
I didn't put my name either.
We're a small enough group, we can just. I was wondering if that was somebody on my team too. That's definitely a question that we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, it's already been asked by multiple people at my district. And I'm at Peninsula, data integration analyst.
So you all have been back a little bit longer and actually have some more comparison data, right?
Yeah, we had elementary students back in December, January, because we did the pilot with the Tacoma Department of Health, and then secondary students came back in March.
Like, so after this week, we have a week of data for secondary students, so maybe too early to say. Yeah, related question, like just more specific, how does anything vary by learning model, like attendance, enrollment, test scores, all of that, that'll be coming in.
Yeah, I can't speak for everyone else too regarding Menti. I actually typed out my response before you went to the slide, and it didn't appear, so I had to retype it out. Right. So if
Oh,
other
so it
people,
didn't show up
other
before?
people might have submitted responses that aren't showing up if they were fast.
If anybody's is missing too and they want to just chime in, we're a pretty small group, so you can just let us know what you're thinking.
In that spirit, that was me that just popped up. I did do the mistake of submitting too quickly. My name's
I
Jake.
wasn't ready.
I think I'm a weirdo in this space in that I actually work for a network of public charter and middle schools out of Denver, but I live in the Tacoma area and have grown up in this area. So I'm looking forward to engage with this group. And yes, similar to how have students performed across remote and in person, just sort of particularly looking at engagement and attendance across cohort and how that kind of engagement varies on days that they're in person and remote versus the group of students who are still entirely remote, et cetera, has been a huge topic. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. How will we monitor attendance for hybrid students who might start as online, then change to in-person? Yeah, definitely have some questions about that. And also how many students is that, you know, that are changing, starting in one thing for whatever reason, deciding it's not working and making it change. What is testing? Why are we testing when we are testing? Yeah, like that's what schools are asking and things, right, Carol?
They're driving me crazy with those questions, and I keep answering them, and they turn around and ask them again the same day.
They didn't like the answer. Keep
No,
asking.
or
get a
they
different
don't
response.
understand why I don't know, because I always know.
We are in a different state right now, like, yeah, with no spring testing and things happening in the fall and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions that are coming up or what they're anticipating? We just want to say hi.
Mm.
Oh, there's another one down here. Yeah, related to what you were talking about, Jake, that measuring engagement and quality of school experience, depending on what mode of instruction you're getting, what that looks like and what we have access to. Seems like we have some things that we can discuss further in the second half of this meeting is what I'm taking away from this. So it'll be good. I know we have some similar questions we're thinking about. So, okay, well, if we're good there, I will transition over to Coleman to give us an update and show some new features that came out in the latest release. Is I think the last two from Tableau.
All right, sounds good. Let me
I'll stop sharing.
share my screen. Yeah. You guys are seeing just the Tableau PowerPoint.
Yep.
Perfect. So hello everyone, I'm Coleman Wagoner. I think I've met most of you on other sessions, but if not, I'm a lead solutions engineer at Tableau. Been at Tableau for about 10 years now. Has kind of seen the evolution of this user group really probably over the last 3 years or so. Certainly it's great to see how many districts are involved and the types of questions that they're trying to answer with data. I'm excited to present today one of my favorite topics, which is Tableau innovation. Tableau is currently on a quarterly release schedule, so we're constantly adding new features that enable our customers to do more with data faster. And so I like to present those types of new features and how they can benefit our customers. I like to start every presentation with Tableau's mission, and it's really focused on people. We certainly believe that people are your greatest asset, and putting data into their hands in a meaningful way that allows them to ask and answer questions with data and explore data is incredibly powerful. So our mission is help people see and understand data. 7 words that really drive everything we do as a product and as a platform. When we talk about the Tableau platform, really it's robust capabilities across all areas of business intelligence. Certainly data access is very important. With every release, oftentimes you'll see new data connectors come in Tableau with a goal to really help our customers connect to the sources of data that they use most commonly. Data prep has been a big area of investment for Tableau, especially with the Tableau Prep Builder product, which really enables business users to clean, prepare data for analysis and output it as a data source that then could be more easily consumed in Tableau. Governance, certainly an important topic. We're well known for our depth of analytics as well. So with every release, a lot of new capabilities around geospatial analytics, as well as we're doing a little bit more in terms of things like predictive analytics in 2021.1. So let's dive in. If you go to tableau.com/products all features, essentially that's a rolling list of all of the new features that have come out, I think since version 9. I highlight this because certainly every district might be on different versions of Tableau and Tableau Server. And so that makes things sometimes challenging in a new feature presentation where I might show something and a customer may not be upgrading their environment for a period of time. So they have to wait to get the new feature until IT rolls it out, a new version to them. So I'm going to start with 2020.3. So once again, that was probably around the October timeframe. But for this point, I just feel like time is flying by, and there's always constantly new releases. It's something that I really enjoy about my job in terms of just always having new functionality to prepare for and understand and try to present it to my customers. So in 2020.3, the big feature I would say was the ability to write to external databases from Tableau Prep Builder. So some of you may not be familiar with Tableau Prep Builder. Essentially, it's an application where users can connect to data and essentially using a very intuitive, visual, and direct approach, clean and prepare data for analysis and create outputs that then can be consumed in Tableau. But being able to take that output, historically it's been a CSV or a Tableau extract, but now being able to write results back into a backend database like SQL Server, Oracle, or whatever it might be is really useful, because certainly you use more than one data analytics application in your environments. And so being able to have a nice centralized database that you can write results into is really useful because you can use it in other tools and platforms. Next in 2020.3 was our first kind of step into predictive functions. So there's 2 new table calculations. One is model quantile and model percentile. I don't claim to have a statistics background, but many of our customers have been interested in predictions, but don't always necessarily have the skill set or expertise to leverage tools like R or Python and create those models. And so you can certainly look at the documentation, but model quantile is more about trying to return a target value at a specified percentile. So in this case, with what's on the screen, it'd be, what is the kind of the median target value for total sales based off of the total quantity that we've sold historically. And then model percentile is a little bit more of a probability function in terms of looking at potentially a value and determining whether it's an outlier by determining whether based on the other predictives, whether the unobserved value is going to be less than or equal to the observed mark, or what do you see and experience in the view. Next in 2020.3 was subscription run on refresh. I think that's really useful. So for those of you that are not familiar with subscriptions, essentially it's a way to say that I want a snapshot of this dashboard delivered to my inbox every Friday morning at 8 a.m. But what oftentimes happened is certainly when you have a Tableau server, you have Tableau extracts refreshing on various schedules. But there are times where an extract refresh might get delayed and a subscription might run without the most fresh updated data. So what this does is when a dashboard that uses a single data source on a single extract refresh runs, it's then going to immediately trigger the the Tableau server subscription snapshot at that point in time after the extract has been updated.
Is that server only, did you say?
I believe it's available online as well, but I'll have to double check on that.
And it would send an email with a link to the dashboard that's updated.
Exactly. So the subscription is basically an image. One of the other features that was added in the last year or so is the ability to attach essentially a PDF of the dashboard to the inbox, but then basically it generates an email at that time when the data is updated and then delivers it to people's inboxes. So they kind of see a snapshot of the most recent updated data. Okay, next, rolling into 2020.4, one of the key features there was releasing Tableau Prep Builder in the browser. So you're still a creator user, but you're able to do essentially the Tableau Prep work of cleaning, preparing data for analysis in the Tableau server or Tableau Online interface. And so that's helpful. I think one, from the IT administration perspective, you don't need to manage and install individual users' applications. And then certainly depending on the user and the district, right? Not always do you have the highest grade hardware. And so being able to have it run on the server with a little more compute power, certainly something that's very useful as well. Next in 2020.4 was new features around the geospatial capabilities of Tableau. So what essentially allows you to do is drag and drop multiple geospatial objects in terms of a layering. So maybe I want to map my individual schools that I have in a spatial file, as well as school bus routes and school bus stops, and right, you may have any number of different kind of geospatial layers, and it makes it easier to essentially lay those onto a map without doing kind of the more complex dual axes and other things that our customers have had to do in the past. So we'll show a demo of that. Next in 2020.4, that's really useful when you're working with the predictive modeling functions or table calculations, like a running average, is being able to see those into the future by using the date axis extension feature. And so historically, Tableau has only been able to generate or plot a point on top of data that it got back from a query. But when you don't have data into the future, you couldn't plot a point or a data point into the future without the date axis extension capabilities. So overall, it's just 2 clicks away to extend the axes. And I want to basically extend this out 6 months and see the continuing, moving average trend of, I don't know, COVID cases or whatever it might be into the future based on some prediction or running calculation. Next in 2020.4 was web authoring enhancements. And this has been an ongoing feature improvement over the last few years, is really trying to enable more people with that Explorer role to be able to have a very similar Tableau desktop-like experience in the browser. So we're just trying to make it a little more on parity with Tableau desktop that the creator users would use. So we added things like the highlight actions, being able to apply a quick filter to multiple worksheets, create sets, create extracts. There's a number of useful features here, and it's all part of this move to the web initiative as we continue to expand on that. So less people are relying on running applications locally on a desktop on their workstation, but being able to do more in the cloud or in the web. So now diving into 2021.1, I would say that we released our first major integration with the Salesforce platform by integrating Einstein Discovery in Tableau. So Einstein Discovery is powered by machine learning. Essentially, it allows data scientists, analysts, business users alike to load in data and create powerful predictive models without needing to write algorithms, without needing Python or R. It really provides this intuitive no-code environment to do that. And then it's going to be able to bring those AI-powered analytics into Tableau in 3 different ways. The first one is with a dashboard extension object. So for those of you that are not familiar with dashboard extensions, think of it as like a JavaScript widget you can bring into a Tableau dashboard and configure, and it allows for when a user makes selections on marks in the dashboard, having it pass the values to the extension and run the predictive algorithm across the selected marks. The next one is the analytics extension service, which is basically being able to leverage a Tableau table calculation. It's called a script function to basically pass in the data values to Einstein Discovery. It's going to run its predictive algorithm and return back a result, but it's using the native Tableau calculation language to call that prediction. And then the next one, I don't believe it's been released yet in Tableau Prep Builder. I could be wrong, but it is where you're basically in Tableau Prep, the ability to add in essentially a predictive step into the flow of your Tableau Prep Builder to basically score your data with that predictive model. So I dove into each one of these a little bit in that slide. Once again, a dashboard extension provides that native Salesforce prediction widget to the dashboard, and it interacts with the marks on the viz. The important thing here is it certainly requires the newest release, which is 2021.1. It also requires Tableau CRM, which is Salesforce's analytics platform, which is now called Tableau CRM. So you'd need a license to that, at least with a person that then creates the model, but then you can bring that model into Tableau. And then there's a licensing component called Einstein Discovery licenses, basically for those who need to consume the prediction. So there's a little bit of that kind of add-on component to it, but that's what the Einstein dashboard extension would do. The Einstein table calculation is essentially in that predictive model within Salesforce. They have a button that says create the Tableau table calculation. Essentially, it's a script function similar to how you'd integrate R and Python in Tableau. You're using these script functions. You call the function and then you pass in aggregated data into that predictive function. The next useful feature in 2021.1 is what are called quick level detail expressions, essentially being able to select a measure and a dimension and create a fixed table calculation with actually having to learn the fixed calculation language syntax, being able to make that a little more approachable for business users. We also in 2021.1 released a unified notification center on Tableau Server and Tableau Online. So users would get notifications for a number of different things, like if an extract refresh was failing or a Tableau Prep Builder flow was failing, or users were commenting or sharing visualizations with you, essentially would show up in one unified notification area of the Tableau Server. All right, so let's do a little bit of demo. I know that Ashley had mentioned Einstein Discovery, so I have a little bit of a presentation on it, and then if people are interested further, I can actually do more of a live presentation of Einstein Discovery, and then map layering and quick level of detail expressions, and then certainly I can be open to Q&A as well. All right. Ashley, do you see Tableau Desktop now?
Yes.
Okay. And let me pause here and just open up the chat. Question around the Tableau Prep on the server. Yes, so you can create and publish flows from Tableau Prep Builder to Tableau Server, but the automation of those flows to say that I want to run these steps every Monday morning on a schedule similar to extract refresh, that is where that data management add-on comes in. And some interest in quick LODs as well. All right, so Einstein Predictions in Tableau. This was actually a real world type of scenario that I received. It was part of an RFP that I had to do for the California State University system. They had a BI RFP, invited a bunch of vendors, and one of the use cases was they sent over some sample data. It's pretty common kind of data science data source that looked at historical data about students. And so in this data set, we had, basically a value for a grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, with the goal of being able to train and create a predictive model to predict grade 3 for future students based off of other factors, certainly like grade 1, grade 2, but then other factors like home internet access, school support, parents' educational level, those types of attributes about a student and how that would influence what their prediction for grade 3 would be. And so as an analyst myself, right, I would use Tableau to drag and drop and start visually exploring relationships in data to start understanding the correlation and significance between grade 3, essentially that target variable, and other variables. But I quickly kind of get out of that mode once I need to start thinking about running statistical tests and developing a predictive model that usually involves that specialized skill set of writing code with Python or R. And so for me, I didn't have that expertise. So I went to another solutions engineer who had a data science background. So he took the data. Certainly it's possible to integrate R and Python code directly in Tableau for those people that are comfortable with those programming languages. So I call it the data scientists that I worked with. Essentially, he wrote lots of code to try to understand which features were statistically significant and important to include in the development of the predictive model. So I include here just screenshots of some of the Tableau calculations that he was writing in order to do things like a t-test or an ANOVA, and using Python to come up with the statistical significance of the various variables that he would include in the model. And you can see here he created something giant that I could never kind of run through and understand. But the idea is he was using R and Python essentially to do this type of statistical analysis. The other thing that the data scientist did that was really useful was he used Tableau Prep Builder to clean the data, essentially choose which fields he wanted to include to pass into 4 different Python scripts. So he was using linear regression, k-neighbors, random forest, lasso regression to effectively score each record and then come up with a predicted value in the output. And then from that output, for each student, he would have 4 different values for their prediction for grade 3. And then obviously you could look at things like the model errors to figure out which one was the most accurate predictive model to use. Now, I would say that most of our customers do not necessarily have the technical resources on staff to do this type of work. Certainly, more importantly, it takes a lot of time to write that amount of code and effort to develop a predictive model and then deploy it in production. And then part of the challenge is I'm sure for our customers, any predictive model that they would have built historically, when things started changing with COVID, all of a sudden their predictive model is no longer accurate because it's a whole different world. And so being able to quickly make adjustments, explore data on the fly and be able to generate these predictive models really fast, certainly really powerful. So that's where Einstein Discovery really offers a better way to do this. So it's powered by machine learning. Essentially, it allows those data scientists, analysts, business users alike to load in data and develop in a no-code environment predictive models that then could be leveraged by Tableau. The important things are that you do need the Tableau CRM license, which is that native Salesforce analytics platform to load in data and generate a predictive model. And then from there, once the model is deployed, then it can be brought in with a dashboard extension, but users consuming the prediction in that dashboard would also need essentially a Salesforce credential to access it. So there's a little bit of that add-on component aspect because you are integrating a Salesforce platform into the Tableau platform. So we'll keep going through the story point here, but I might be able to do this live as well. So Tableau CRM, which is formerly known as Einstein Analytics, it's the native Salesforce application. A user creates a data set in Analytics Studio and then creates what's called a Einstein Discovery story. the story goal is what do you want to maximize or
Oh, looks like you froze.
has it updated yet? Should I stop and and then share?
Coleman, you cut out for a little bit there for the last 30 seconds or so.
All right, I was kicked off Zoom. Let me share my screen again. Do you see it okay?
I don't see it yet.
Okay, let me turn off my video, see if that was killing things.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. So once again, basically with the Tableau CRM, which is formerly Einstein Analytics, it's that native analytics application inside of Salesforce. And then the story goal is basically defining what you want to maximize or minimize in the predictive model. So in this data set, we wanted to maximize grade 3. That was our target value that we're trying to predict. But it could be something else. It could be doing, binary classification on a field. For example, if I had historical data that indicated whether a student graduated yes or no, then I could use this to predict essentially a likelihood or propensity that a student would graduate. The idea is you set up the model by choosing what you want to maximize or minimize. Then that data essentially is ingested into Salesforce and Einstein begins crunching the numbers, doing the statistical tests and analysis. And then it'll come to this type of screen, which will show you, you can't really see it in the screenshot, but basically it looks at the various variables in the data set and shows which ones are highly correlated to grade 3. So in this case, certainly their score on grade 1 and grade 2 would correlate to what they might score on grade 3, but also had information like if there was a high number of course failures, or if they're pursuing higher education, they were more likely to have a higher grade 3. Meaning, if they're pursuing higher education, they're probably more focused in school, whatever it might be. And then lastly, you evaluate the model, and it returns back with the type of algorithm that's used, all of the kind of key important statistics around the accuracy of the model. And then once you finalize the model, you click deploy model, and then it basically is now a predictive model that can then be used in that dashboard extension or in the Tableau script table calculation functions to say, I want to call this predictive model function definition from Einstein Analytics. These are the columns, these are the fields from the Tableau visualization that pass into that model to return back the predicted value. Okay, so that was just really a goal to kind of compare and contrast what it took to create predictive models in Tableau using Python and R compared to being able to then process this through a service to generate the predictive model without having to write code. Any questions about that? Would anybody like to see it as more of a live demo? And Ashley, how much time did I have to present?
You have 45 minutes. So I think we started with 45. So you'd have until
About 2:30.
2:30. Yeah.
Okay. So a quick poll of the audience. I'll check the chat, or maybe I lost the chat from the previous session when I got kicked off the Zoom. But anybody interested in seeing this as more of a live demo? Ashley, I know you said you were interested in Einstein Predictions. Does this give you the information you wanted, or would you like to see it in a live demo?
Yeah, let's see some of it live.
Okay. All right. So here I am in essentially Einstein Analytics Tableau CRM. So I'm in a Salesforce org. I don't know how many of the districts use Salesforce in any of its kind of various modules for student success and other things, case management. But essentially Salesforce is a CRM, but it has Analytics Studio. And the first step is basically connecting to data. So very similar to Tableau Desktop, there's ways to connect to data. In this case, I'm going to connect to a CSV file of historical data. If you had data in Salesforce, and then I guess there's a way certainly to bring in external data from a database as well. I don't have that enabled on my Salesforce instance here. I would, very similar to Tableau, I'd start by connecting to the data, and I click open, and basically it's very similar to Tableau Desktop in terms of it's reading the various fields that I have in the data source. So for each row is essentially a student. It talks about some of their demographic information, if they have internet access, if they're doing paid tutoring, and other factors. Some of the factors are 1 through 4, kind of categorical as well, meaning, degree of going out with friends. 4 means you'd go out, every week with friends, versus 1 being, you are more introverted, whatever it might be. It's kind of scoring those as a 1 through 4 as well, some yes, no's, those types of things. And then you have basic grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. So we upload the file. That's going to take a minute to load in. I think this is about 1,000 or so records of student data, or fake sample student data. And that will load in as a data set. And then once the data set is loaded into Salesforce, there's really 2 options. There's create a story and explore. Explore is basically a Tableau-like experience of I'm creating visualizations and dashboards. That's the Salesforce way of doing it, as an exploration. But for the predictive modeling, we're going to create a story. And once again, this is determining what do I want to maximize in my story. So in this case, I want to maximize grade 3, but in reality, it could be a binary field. I think there is some in here, right? Where, home internet access is yes, right? It could be, I want to maximize graduated as yes as a field. And then that would run different algorithms to come up with more of a probability or likelihood that a student would graduate. But for this, we're just going to go ahead and maximize grade 3. I expect grade 3 to be a whole number greater than or equal to 0, because it's basically, it's like getting a prediction for a final test score. And I click story type. We want insights and predictions. So we'll choose setup options. And then there's the option of choosing which fields you want to use for the story. So essentially automated is Salesforce, I think, brings in up to 50 fields that have the highest correlation with the predicted target value. Manual just allows you to manually select fields, right? Certain things like student zip code may not matter, or if you had both zip code and city, you probably wouldn't want to load those both fields into analysis, because they're basically the same thing. So it gives you that option of manual versus automated. I'm just going to choose automated. Now it's going to take a few minutes to basically load in those 1,000 records and begin creating various statistical tests, detect patterns, evaluate improvement opportunities, and then generate the charts and explanations. But the important thing is it's doing all of this in the background without having to write any R or Python scripts to come up with a predictive model for grade 3. Yeah, this might take another minute or so, but it's only 1,000 records. Hopefully it won't take too long. And I'll just pause there and take a quick look at the chat. All right, someone's excited for quick LODs, and go for the live demo. If only this was a cooking show where you had the magic of putting something in the oven and having it pop out in 3 minutes when it took 45 minutes to do. But this shouldn't take too long. And I feel like I ran it just before the call and it went pretty quickly. And if not, I already have the story created. So I can also, maybe I'll just exit out of that and go into my story here. Let's see, this one was created. All right, so this essentially is what the output looks like. So first it looks at the various variables that were brought in on the data connection, and then describes which fields have the highest correlation to the max, the target of maximizing grade 3. And so the average grade 3 is 11.34 across 1,044 records. And then something like grade 2, it shows that, for grade 2, of that kind of bucket of people that scored between 16 and 19 on grade 2, they on average scored a 17 on grade 3, which is certainly higher than the average. And so you start seeing, based off of the bucket of what they scored on grade 2, you can see what their average is compared to the overall average on grade 3. And it goes in and looks at various combinations of fields and relationships that determine whether they do better or worse. So maybe I want to look at pursuing higher education, and it shows that those that were pursuing higher education on average had a 12, compared to those that were not pursuing education had an average grade 3 of 8.3. But in the end, essentially all of this goes into the predictions in the model. So there's a prediction side where this is more of your what if analysis. If I had a student that had a grades 2 score of 14 to 15, then it kind of gives you what the baseline is, and then says, well, if they had a grade 2 between these fields, then this is what kind of gives you the waterfall approach of what the predicted value would be as you change those predictions. And then lastly is the model, which is looking at more of the data science model evaluation, looking at things like residuals and all of those types of kind of key aspects. But that's where you start seeing, these types of predictions in terms of the model. And then the last step is clicking the button to deploy the model, right? So if I click deploy model, which I think I already did, it just determines whether we're deploying the model as a new prediction. And then, in this case, if you're not a true Salesforce customer, you're deploying the model without connecting it to a Salesforce object. I mean, I don't want to necessarily tie the prediction to a database table within Salesforce as an object. I want to just deploy it separately as a node. You can add various filters, etc. But at the end of the day, you're now in Tableau, and you would go into help and settings and performance, and then manage analytics extension connection. So this is where you can bring in things like Einstein Discovery, TabPy, which is our Python server, rserve. And so I basically have my Salesforce credentials to enable the Einstein prediction here. Then what we're doing is, here is the extension object inside of a Tableau dashboard. So it still has all of the Tableau capabilities here of your normal visualizations, but then as you make selections, it is, let's reconnect to the data source here. What did I time out on? Maybe I timed out on, let's see. Right, so once again, your visualizations are still interactive as you'd expect, but then your selections get passed, in this case, into this data table that has all of the various factors that then get passed to the Einstein prediction service to then say that, for these students that scored this high in grade 1, they're likely to have score around a 16 on grade 3. And then being able to click on an individual student, pass in just their data records into the predictive model will then return, what their predicted grade 3 is, and then various top predictors on how to potentially, or what improved their score over the baseline. And so the configuration of the extension object. So once again, you're dragging and dropping the dashboard extension object onto the dashboard, and then you're configuring it. So essentially, let me go back a step or two. So first is, what's the prediction definition? That is, what Salesforce predictive model are you selecting from the service? And then basically defining how you're passing data into the prediction. So in this case, I have this data passing to Einstein table, which has all of the related fields that need to get passed into the definition of the predictive model. But you could tie it to parameters in terms of that more what if scenario of, what if a student had X, Y, and Z as variables? What would that do to the predictive model? But I'm just doing it based off of the worksheet. Then I need to define the fields in the predictive model and how they map to the fields on the individual worksheet in Tableau. And then I can basically describe what data is using prediction. I want the average to pass through, and then I can define how many predictive elements I want, and then reload it again, and hopefully that will work. So the idea is as I make selections, my visualizations update accordingly, pass the value into the predictive model. This one is the predicted grade 3. And what that is essentially a Tableau table calculation. Once again, I don't know why this doesn't look great in terms of the formatting, but script real is basically the function, the table calculation functions in Tableau that call R, Python, or some of these external analytics services. And then we're basically defining the model and the columns that are being used. And then they are table calculations, so every field needs to be aggregate. So you need to use the things like attribute or min-max on fields like free time after school, the total grade 1, grade 2, and those types of things, but it passes into that predictive model. The nice thing is you don't have to learn how to write that table calculation yourself. In Salesforce and Tableau CRM, if I go into the model manager, and I believe this was the one that I created, I believe it's under settings, I could click on this drop down and say create the Tableau table calculation. And this is where I could copy this from the predictive model in Salesforce and then copy and paste it into the Tableau table calculation. Okay, so overall that was just designed to show you the process of uploading historical data, being able to then generate a predictive model, and then in the actual data that you tie the predictive model to, you wouldn't actually have grade 3, but being able to then score the model with what the predictive value for grade 3 based off the other factors and variables that were part of that predictive model. That makes sense? How was that for everybody? Because that was the first time I've presented Tableau and Einstein integration together.
I think it was helpful to see the steps involved, because everything that's been in the release is like, here's some screenshots. It's this predictive thing. It's like, what does it actually look like to use it?
Yeah, no, I agree. And the new features page, shows the highlights, but not how to do things in practice. And I find that that's even challenging in my role. Right? I know something is capable, but then sometimes it functions differently on Tableau Online versus Tableau Server or whatever it might be. So yeah, certainly something worth checking out. But that's what the process looks like. Next, I wanted to cover map layering because I think it's a really cool set of features in Tableau. And so what this is basically a data connection that brings in multiple spatial objects into one data connection. So it could be an ArcGIS connector, it could be a spatial file, but in general, you're basically setting up a relationship between these spatial objects, or you're doing a spatial intersect join to bring in these 4 different, basically consider them data tables together. And then each one has this type of geometry field, the spatial object. So if I double click on that, it's going to begin and just render back. In this case, this is building footprints of a particular building on a university campus. So I can put that onto detail, and it's, I think it's the University of Kansas is where I found the data just openly available. Then I might be interested in bringing in things like bus routes, because I want to be able to understand the number of the various bus routes and how they go to different buildings on campus. So here's another geometry from another part of that data source. And so you'll see that there's now this option to add a marks layer. So I drag and drop that. And now you'll see that I have my bus routes as well as my map of buildings on campus. I'll zoom in a little bit. And so now it's just a normal mark in Tableau. So I could drag and drop, I don't know, my route number onto color, or maybe just, yeah, I'll keep it onto color. And then I have bus stops, right? It's another geo layer that I have. So I can drag and drop where the various bus stops are located on each route. And then I want to bring in bike projects because we want more students to bike to campus. And so there's another layer. So it just gives you this unlimited ability to very quickly and easily map together multiple geospatial objects on a dashboard without having to do the kind of historical way of doing it, which was more along the lines of I have a geometry, then I have to duplicate this as a dual axes, and then I need to try to switch my geometry here and then do a dual axes, right? It gives you that additional flexibility of really quickly being able to layer in many different geospatial layers onto a map. Does anybody do any type of geospatial analysis?
Yeah, in Kent, we do some stuff with our shape files, and then we have lat longs for each of our students in each of our schools. And we started working on bus paths, but then, you know, pandemic hit.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, one of the things that I'm sure you've been asked this multiple times, but one of the things that we hoped would come in some of these updates is the ability to say, like, for overlapping shapes, or like, is a lat long inside of a shape file, you know?
Yeah.
So that's something that we've managed to do it using other tools, but it would be really slick if it was, we could easily, you know, do it.
Yeah, kind of like a count of number of students within an object. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, because we can do it with the point with the radius, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the
Radius and
boundaries.
buffer.
Yeah, boundaries are not, you know, circles.
Yeah, that's true for sure.
So it would be that kind of that same functionality, but for a shape instead of the point with the radius.
Yeah, I'm trying to think with the spatial intersect join, what type of aggregation you can do that between different points and polygons. I'd have to think. I don't have anything off the top of my head that would do it in terms of a spatial intersect join that would calculate how many, you know, student lat longs are within that particular object.
Yeah, another thing that I've done some kind of like proof of concepts, but nothing official that's been like put to production on looking at doing like the hex bins. I don't know if it was like a big thing, I think, at the conference a couple of years ago. It was like the hot, I don't know if it was new or not, but I saw a ton of examples of it. So we implemented it. So they don't line up with the you know, school boundaries, but you do kind of get a general idea, you know. So if you can see, like, you know, like heat maps of population or low attendance or whatever it is, right? Kind of see how these maps play with each other. That's another space thing that we've done.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, there's definitely continue to expand on the geospatial with each release. So you already mentioned some of them, like the buffer and the distance function, a few other things, as spatial calculations in Tableau. But yeah, there's lots of interesting things there. And what did I have next? I guess I could do a quick LOD. I haven't done much of those, but think of it as, let's say I had, what do I have? I have states, I have regions. Nope, that's not the field I thought it was. Let me do category. So I have product category, subcategory, and sales. I know I I know you'd probably prefer an education data set, but the idea is okay, if I wanted to compare the total of binders to the total for category, right? I could say that I want to take my sales, drag it on top of category, and that should, did it create it? Where did it go? Nope, it didn't drop where I thought it was going to. Drag it and drop it. I can't remember if it's control. If not, I can select category and sales, and then choose create level of detail calculation, and then it's going to create it for you. So be able to kind of multi-select and then quickly create a level of detail expression that then I can drag and drop, such that I can see the difference between that, and I can calculate the difference between that and the overall category to get some sort of percentage calculation or whatever it might be. Okay, let's quick LODs. Not as familiar with this one, but the predictive functions, the table calculation, for example, for model quantile, I want essentially what the median target value for total sales is based off of my attribute, which is the month. So based on my historical data of month, what is the target value for total sales at that 50th percentile? And so you create that, and it creates this type of prediction curve. And then from there, I could click this drop down arrow, which is where I have the extend my date range a certain number of months. So I want to basically draw marks 6 months into the future to see how that's going to change in 6 months. And so you get to see based off of the trend or whatever that model function does, that it's going to continue to increase as a prediction. So it does allow for things like moving averages and those types of functions, and then you basically add additional months onto the axes and generate a data point where we don't have data points in the actual data connection itself. Okay. With that, I'm at 2:30. Hopefully this was helpful in kind of seeing, one, the Einstein Prediction service and how to bring in data and what that means to create a predictive model, and then how to bring that into Tableau with both the Tableau dashboard extension and as well as the script function as part of the Einstein Analytics extension service. Then we also talked about map layering and how that can really help you to bring in multiple geospatial objects together on the same map. And with that, I will stop and see if there's any questions in the chat.
Also, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask. We have a little bit of time. People have some questions.
Yeah, Coleman, this was super helpful. At the risk of maybe revealing a misunderstanding of mine, just wanted to clarify something about the Einstein. This really cleared up kind of what that integration does, but just to clarify definitively, like if a district is not leveraging Salesforce in any way, am I correct that Einstein integration is only applicable for a district that also is leveraging Salesforce for a particular data set or workflow?
So you could do it outside of Salesforce in terms of its core kind of CRM type of experience. It would still create what's called a Salesforce org. Basically, you'd have authentication into a Salesforce instance. So it's a software as a service, but I'm sure you'd sign up. Then you'd have Tableau CRM, which is that Einstein Analytics Studio. And then because you don't actually have data inside of Salesforce, you would essentially be kind of limited to saying, well, you're going to either use a CSV or potentially score it with an external data. So basically think of it as if this was let's say it was a separate application, even by Tableau, it'd be still something that you would, need a license to authenticate into it to create the model as if it was a separate application. The fact that it's a Salesforce application doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily have to be a Salesforce customer in that sense. You would end up, needing licenses to Tableau CRM to actually bring in the data and create the model. And then there is an element to it of, basically I needed to, in the Tableau desktop, I needed to basically manage the analytics extension, which required my account. And then there's a licensing component with Salesforce to basically have Salesforce credentialed users be able to leverage and consume the results of the predictive model. Like in Tableau server, if you had a dashboard and you needed 20 people that needed to see the dashboard with the predictions on it, you'd need Tableau Einstein licenses. And I don't know what that looks like in terms of education pricing for that service. But the idea is even if you're not a Salesforce customer, you could potentially use this as a prediction service outside of it.
Got it. I appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
Any other questions? Anybody think of any features that have come out in the last few releases that you've been really excited about?
I don't know, I think it's maybe a year old now, but the data noodles have been a game changer for
Good.
setting up some of the data sources. And then, yeah, because it wasn't in the first edition, but then the second update after data noodles came out when they had like the calculations for the joins, or not the joins, the relationships. That was really nice. And allow us to combine a lot of data sources without either A, doing a ton of pre-aggregation work, or B, having massive duplicated rows and stuff like that. So the data noodles are great. I use them all the time.
Good. Very good. Yeah. Is everybody familiar with the relationships content that came out in 2020.2? So it would have been, probably about a year ago. But yeah, it's definitely a new way to work with data, especially with data sets that are multiple levels of granularity. And so rather than joining a table up front, it really allows you to connect and relate tables. And then based off what you drag and drop, there's some rules in Tableau that define, whether it's going to be an inner join or an outer join, or just treat it as a completely separate aggregation, as if it was blended, but it's one data connection that does all of those things rather than creating multiple data connections. And it helps with, as you mentioned, the data duplication issues. And so if you haven't seen it, let's see where's see if I have the data connection here. So basically, this is what he's talking about in terms of the noodle concept of relationships. But as you drag and drop a field, it looks different in terms of what you're bringing in. And essentially, that is your relationship between various tables. So in this case, I have books. A book could have certainly an author, but it could win one or many awards. It can be checked out hundreds of times. It might have thousands of ratings. These types of tables, in general, in previous versions of Tableau, you'd pretty much always have to create up separate data connections to bring in each one of those fact tables together and either try to blend everything together. But the relationships is an easy way to define how to connect tables with different levels of granularity and bring that together in Tableau. The other important aspect is that when you double click on a table, you can have that previous experience of joining table A to table B. But if not, this basically then creates a logical table that relates to other tables that you bring in. Any other questions? If not, I'll turn it back to Ashley to engage in the other discussion topics for the day.
All right. Thanks, Coleman. Appreciate the time and sharing the updates. It's always nice to see the demos, and sometimes you only get so far with the release notes and all of those pieces.
Yep.
One question I did have about the Einstein piece is there documentation somewhere about like the models that are being used and kind of the background of how all of that works?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. It's probably in Salesforce documentation. And then another thing that's really nice about Salesforce, for those of you that are not familiar with it, has what's called Trailhead. And it's basically free e-learning on all of their products and platforms. And so you can take Trailheads for TCRM, you'd add your email address, create an account, but basically they have free learning for all of their products. And it's very much, here is a, spin up a demo environment of TCRM, and then you can then step through the information step by step, and basically gives you kind of a demo environment. Because it's a software as a service, it's very quick and easy just to get started and load in a data set and kind of explore what it looks like with some of your own data. It's kind of like a free trial environment.
Cool. Good to know.
Yes, it's been quite a bit of my life over the last year. I'm almost up to Salesforce Ranger status, which is like, each learning module, you get a badge and a certain number of points. There's usually in the e-learning trainings, you read through some information and then you answer a quiz. And so I think Ranger is 50,000 points and 100 badges. I'm just about there because our teams really had to learn a lot about Salesforce really quickly. It's a really good platform.
Thanks. Keep you motivated by giving you badges and status.
Yeah, I guess.
That's good to know. We have some stuff to check out, that there's some free resources there. All right. Well, our next section is more of an open discussion for the group based on some topics that came up last time. And one of the topics that came up was COVID dashboards and what different districts might be doing for that and what they have available. And Alex from Auburn has offered to share what they are doing over there. So I will turn it over to you, Alex, and you should have access to share and all of that, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm an assistant director for special education in Auburn. So I'm not like a data analyst or one of those various job titles you guys tend to have, scientist or statistician or whatever. I know a little bit about statistics because I was a school psychologist and we used a little math in some of our work, but that's about it. So I'm definitely working at this from a bit of a layman's perspective. And with that in mind, the direction I'm going in my data I'm sharing with you here is kind of the opposite of Coleman, not showing the more advanced features of Tableau, but what can be done with the most basic functions that have always been there. That's kind of what I'm proud of about this project. So I'm not going to do a screen share. I don't really think that'll be helpful for you. I'm going to just send you guys a link in the chat to my district webpage. The particular page there. You could navigate to it just by probably Googling it, but there's a lot of parts of the web page, so this is the easiest way to get there. What this is a COVID case activity dashboard that shows not our community, we have that separate, but our actual schools, the number of cases that have come up in the schools. And it's embedded as a component of our web page. If you're able to kind of scroll down from that link, hopefully you can find it. Embedded as a Tableau public dashboard. We have Tableau Online, that's what we use for most of our internal things, but you actually can't do this with Tableau Online, to my understanding. In order to use an embed code from online, the only people that would be able to see it would have to have viewer licenses, which we have a couple hundred of those, I believe, in the district, but not enough for every parent, every bus driver, every paraeducator who wants to check out this data. So in this case, we're paying for Tableau Online, but it's not helping us with this issue. I think Server could probably have done it, but we don't have Server. And of course, public is free, so that's cool. The basic kind of design idea of the dashboard was to be as simple as possible. There's no flashy like donut charts or maps. I do like those things, but I was just trying to have kind of a somber display of transparency about what's obviously a very serious topic. Not going to use like the design of like, you know, big numbers at the top that say something like number of days since our last COVID case or something. It just doesn't really make sense in this context to have the data like, you know, smack you in the face when you get there. It's for transparency, and you can comb through it, but that's all I really wanted to be able to do. I'm really happy that it's like automated. It checks a Google Sheet once a day by itself. So using Google Sheets as a connector, which our school nursing team updates manually. When they get a new case report, they put it in the sheet. This dashboard connects to that sheet every day about 5 p.m. and it takes whatever data they put in and translates it using all the calculations that I wrote into these columns. Let's see. Yeah, using the form I think is a pretty good way to do it. I like Google Sheets because you can connect it to an actual form that then populates the sheet, or you could have drop-down boxes in the sheet to make sure the data is entered cleanly. So long as nobody goes rogue and starts typing in data by hand, it usually calculates pretty accurately. I did all this using traditional joins, using the different sheets, no noodle-based relationships. I'm still working on my understanding of those. I want to be able to trust that I know how this join was made and that this number is accurate. I'm sure the noodles work well for a lot of people, but I'm still learning how they work. This was a little trickier of a dashboard for me to make because it wasn't just me presenting to a school principal about their school or something like that. I was trying to think of what would work for a lot of people. So, for example, our school nursing team wanted there to be, you know, a dozen more columns of different ways to describe the data, where I personally probably would have gone for fewer columns just so that it displays more cleanly. So there was a little bit of negotiation to be had there. And as I mentioned, I'm an assistant director, but I have executive directors above me and assistant superintendents who are on the cabinet, and they've all got their opinions about what should be on the public facing side of our webpage and how that should be displayed and how transparent we should be and all those things. So yeah, definitely some negotiation and what's the best way to share this. The actual website, of course, is a component of it. So the dashboard is the chart and like the info button, but everything else on the page that describes what the columns mean, that's just part of our website, and how to find it, of course. So I can't really take any credit for how the website is designed. I think it's imperfect, but my goal was to design this to complement the website, to fit in, not to try to fix the entire district website. Unlike most dashboards I've made, where I usually use a fixed size to ensure that I know it's going to show up properly, in this case, I wanted to use the kind of automatic scaling options, which are, you know, they're kind of confusing, but they make sense. So I used all three: the desktop, the tablet, and the phone kind of mode. So the actual internet window you're looking at will change to a different layout that includes actual different dashboard like components based on the number of pixels in your web browser's iframe. So if you were to reduce your window down and then refresh the page, it would go into like cell phone mode, which I've set up to like turn the labels vertically and more abbreviated things. It's not perfect, but it's kind of cool that they can do that with Tableau Public. Otherwise, it's about what you would expect. You know, some date calculations for the last 14 days type stuff. Number of calculated fields for things like that. One of my bigger challenges was the last update at the bottom where it says April 22nd, 5:13 p.m. Tableau Public's default is to try to give you that in like London time or something, which is a little weird for a Seattle-based company to do that. And you can't use the built-in updated time feature in a calculated field to add hours to that or anything. It can't be done. So I ended up using the now function in Google Sheets to give me a time and then import that. So whenever the data updates, it gets the current time from Google Sheets, and that works. Took a long time to figure that out. Yeah, security-wise, this comes from a confidential piece of data. We actually have all of our case information stored on a different Google Sheet that includes, the names of people who have coronavirus. So that's pretty highly confidential. What I did was I used import range from one Google Sheet to a next to only import certain columns. So I have kind of a less confidential Google Sheet, and then that links to this. So none of the data feeding into this in Tableau Public actually has anybody's names on it. It's just numbers. I also have the public settings set to be hidden, so you can't find this dashboard on my public profile, and all the settings for ability to download the data or the dashboard itself are turned off. So Tableau Public is kind of like medium to low security in the sense that they have these settings you can use, but in the terms of service, it talks about how the data is not going to be secret, so don't put up secret stuff. That's why I chose to use the extra Google Sheet that way. Yeah, so hopefully you're able to poke around at it. Just has a couple basic features. When you hover, it shows you the number of kids who are currently online and hybrid versus not coming into school in person. The info button used to make more sense when I had only certain grades in person. It had like upcoming dates of when those were opening, but they're all open now, so it doesn't seem that necessary. Anyway, that's our basic COVID dashboard.
Thanks for sharing. Anybody have any questions? Comments? Other things to share?
I don't have a question, but I was going to say, the first thing I did when I saw it was Tableau Public was I went and saw if I could download it. I want to make sure you turn that off.
Well, can you tell me, did it work?
Yeah,
For God's sake,
I tried to download it. I couldn't, so that's good.
I was worried. I mean, I've been trying to double check these things. Yeah, I have this idea that, I mean, I'm really happy to have something I can share beyond just the 10 people in my district who really care about data, and the viewers who care a little bit, but not quite as much. Most of the things I've made haven't been viewed by very many people, which throughout my career has been the case. As a psychologist writing reports, people often don't read the words that I write, despite their eloquence. So this is one of the first things I've been able to do that actually is widely utilized by other people. And I like the idea of doing that more. I'm trying to expand the use of some kind of visualizations beyond just those licenses we have for certain types of staff. But the confidentiality thing keeps getting in the way.
Yeah, that's always the trick of Tableau Public, is making sure you have pre-aggregated or non-confidential data.
Has anybody else created anything for COVID specifically in their district? I know in Kent, what has been created has been owned by communications, so we haven't played as big a part in that.
I was going to say we have one, but I was on medical leave when it was needed. And so our communications department created it, and it's not in Tableau, it's in something else. But if
Most
anybody wants to
districts
look at
have
it,
something, but it's usually just like a chart that is maybe even a direct link to a Google Sheet. And my fear is that many of those are manually updated. There's a person who spends a lot of their day logging in and going like, okay, well, this date says it was the 13th. Is that 14 days ago? Today's the 23rd. Let me think about this. And then they change it by hand. And that's what I wanted to avoid forcing our nurses to do, or anybody else. So just all those calculations are happening behind the scenes as long as they put in the date that the test was taken, for example. We have the testing results for people that get the tests done.
Yeah, I think I haven't actually asked how we're collecting it, but I think we're having our site managers, like the people that have to make sure everybody's doing the attestations and stuff. I think they're the ones that are entering it, and it's in a Google Sheet for us too. And I think this is what's it called? The Google data display thing. What's it called? Data Studio. I think that's what he used to do this, to do ours. I put the link in there, but it's not.
Yeah, in terms of free data visualization, that's an interesting, probably has good features. I'm not familiar with it at all.
Yeah.
A few years back, the Energy Conservation Department wanted to put some charts up on our public site. And I thought, well, you know, they make some really nice charts in Tableau, but we don't want 1,000 people licensing kind of issue, you know. I did find a way to kind of cheat, which was to use the command line on Tableau to generate the chart and output it as a JPEG.
Oh,
Then take the JPEG and print it in, you know, and put it wherever the web site could pick it up, and it just change every day. So
wow.
it doesn't allow you to use any of the features of the features of the chart, that if you want the user to interact a little bit.
Mhm. We have a couple like enrollment dashboards that we put on our website that are Tableau public, and I just use the OData connection from OSPI. But
Oh, interesting.
that's all.
So there's a connection on OSPI that you can use.
Mhm.
What did you call it again?
It's called it's an OData connection, and you can download basically what they use for their Tableau dashboards, and it's the publicly available. It's pre-aggregated, and it's like got the test scores, and it's got enrollment information, and they've got stuff like that. I think I put it in Teams at one point, but it's on. I'll find it and put the link in.
Cool.
In the chat. But it's nice because you can connect to it from Tableau, and then just it imports the data. It imports the whole state, so you have to filter down to your district if you only want your district. Or I think I built one using a no data connection that's not public, but where our admin wanted to look at us compared to other districts, and so I just pulled all that data and used it. But it's cool. It's very useful.
Yeah, it sounds useful.
Looks like we have Renton's dashboard as well. So just another take on same type of data like Auburn's reporting, just a different format for how to get that out there. Like,
Oh, interesting. They did colors and stuff. That's cool.
yeah. Do you know, Sheila, how that's updating? Is that happening automatically, or is like a manual process from where the data is feeding in from?
If I remember right, it's a Google Sheet. I'm not really a part of it because he's the only one receiving that information. But I think the last time that I talked to him about it, was a Google Sheet from the school nurse, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then there's that breakdown of information if you hover over, like for a school, the tooltip.
Correct.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That accomplishes the goal of having all, dozen columns, but not actually having them that wide on the page.
Yeah, I like the cases by month at the bottom too, just to see how things have been moving, and then understanding like what's changed between then and more students being in school now that it's April. So thanks for dropping that in there, Sarah. I know we've been good about using Tableau or OSPI data for some of our public facing dashboards too, because it's pre-aggregated, it matches what's on the report card, but I don't think we've been using that connection. I think we've been pulling the files, so something to look into when we're updating. Cool.
Sometimes if you're pulling like the whole history of enrollment files from the whole the whole state, it'll take a while to download it. So, but once you have it, it's there. So it's cool.
It doesn't really change, so it's like.
Mhm.
Anything else related to COVID tracking? We have a couple other pieces that have come up to discuss, if not. All right. Thanks again, Alex. It's always good to hear like somebody talking through the process too. Like, how did we get to this? What did I learn? Why did I choose to do something this way? And it's nice to get something out for the public. Right? It's different audience than for principals and looking at your test scores or all those traditional pieces.
Yeah, nice to use some of the at least the training for stuff we've worked on in the past years.
Okay, I am going to share my screen again and have another prompt in Menti. Let me click on the right button. Okay. So this is a prompt more to start discussion because there were some questions about data prep, but when you think about preparing data for use in Tableau or any other application that needs data, what comes to mind? And I would say what comes to mind, what questions do you still have? What have you learned along the way? Any kind of response to that question? Yes. How much work is it going to be to repeat this if I need to update my data?
Yeah, that was my question. I really like prep. It's very logical, and I can see all of the decisions that I make and the steps, and that's great. But not having any of the automated exporting or anything set up, it's an extra step every time I need to update anything. And so, for example, that wouldn't work for my COVID dashboard. If I had every day to re-output a new thing from prep, it would be a huge obstacle. So I've been really minimizing my use of prep for everything for that reason. I want to be able to update things quickly or automatically if I can.
If your data files change, it's a pain to change to Tableau Prep sometimes too. Like I'd use Tableau Prep for Dibbles, and then we changed to the 8th edition, and it was like I had to redo it from scratch.
Or files you get from OSPI that look a little bit different every year. I think we just recently acquired like Prep Conductor and the orchestrator to be able to have some of these pieces automated, because we're running into the same issue of like, we could use Prep, but then who's going to maintain that? What's it going to look like?
Yeah, my use of prep right now is primarily just when somebody asks for a change to a a spreadsheet. Like if I need to do a join or something and I want to just send a teacher a spreadsheet that lists students with certain characteristics or something, it's easier for me to do in Prep than in Excel because I'm not a wizard at Excel, and I think Prep works better than like VLOOKUPs and stuff. So at least I get a lot of use out of it, but not so much for my dashboards.
Anything else, any other like best practices that have come up, like knowing as you learn more about Tableau and how it likes to have data set up, just knowing whatever you have, what you might need to do? Making sure columns make sense, adding calculated fields and demographics, changing data types, pulling together data from multiple places. All stuff done before you even create like your first chart or anything in Tableau. Source of data and work to get in common formats, pain to manually update, frustration with missing pieces. I think one thing that we have our student data pretty under control, that's from our own SIS, but then it's other sources that come in and being able to combine, and if they have any like keys that'll match, and can you actually pull this data together? Somebody's like, here's a file with some student names in it, have fun. I think one thing that we've tried to do is that if you want us to create a dashboard or pull data together, then it needs to have a student ID in it, or it needs to have some key in it, like, or we're just not even, we're not going to try. We have 27,000 students. We're not matching off of their data. Try to make sure my data is correct, can update automatically on the servers, Tableau friendly before I even start building anything. Are there any checks or things that people do every time to make sure their data is correct? Like those checks of just, does this look right? Am I getting some values that I wouldn't expect? Like have a process for that they do?
Yeah, one of the things that I'll do is, you know, once I pull stuff in, if I know that this data set, you know, after I join everything, it's supposed to be, you know, one row per X, whether that's staff member, student, or school, or whatever it is, right? And then I'll just do a quick little cross tab with the number of records per student or whatever, and then also the count distinct on that, right? So then you can see like, okay, is it one? Like, or like, do they match? Like, are the number of records and the count distinct the same? If so, then we're probably in good shape. And if not, then oh, we're duplicating data. And then if you know that you're going to be duplicating data, then of course you have to figure out, you know, another level of detail deeper than that. You know, figure out, okay, like, so students are duplicated, but you know, it's unique if you look at course and period and term or whatever, right? For example, you know. So everything I make starts with a massive crosstab to get kind of down to the single record. Yeah, and then make sure that you know the whole thing's correct before you get started.
Is that kind of the answer to how you get confidence in your nodal-based relationships? Because that's always been my fear, is that I just kind of a black box how they decide to connect those two things, and probably Tableau knows a good way to do it, but how do I know for sure?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think one of the best ways to gain confidence with using the data noodles is to play around with it. Let's say you have multiple data sets, like you have a data set that's like one row per student, you know, just like list of students' name in the school they go to or whatever, right? And then you have another data set that's their grades. So one row per student, and then it's, times 6 or times 12 or whatever, because, one for every period, right? So, and then you have another data set that has their discipline data. So that's 1 row per discipline incident, right? And so what would happen before, if you join everything together in Tableau, everything will get multiplied and you'll end up with like a lot more duplicate data than you want. But if you do the data noodles, you'll have the 1 row from your original data set, 12 rows from your grades, and your however number of rows from your discipline. And then if you can do counts on each of those, because in Tableau that, they'll each have an ID in it, and you can do a count or a count distinct on the ID from each individual field or each individual table that you're noodling together. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain with words, but I think that, if you have everything that's the same grain of data, 1 row per student, 1 row per student per period or something like that, then go ahead and join whatever. Classic joins are going to be just fine. But if you have the different grains of data, then give noodling a try, and it'll probably make everything faster or easier to use, And of course, you can ask me you can find my email and ask me a question.
The other
Yeah,
thing
it kind of makes sense. I typically just do count distinct on student ID, and then I feel comfortable that I'm counting the right number of students, even if I have 6 grades per kid.
I was also going to say that the other thing that Nick and I tend to do when we're like noodling too is like you can alter like the connection. So like Tableau is going to give you an automatic connection between like your 2 like data sources, but you can go in and change that too. And you can use calculations to like edit that as well, like edit your whatever fields you're connecting on. So it's kind of like what you would do for a join, but it just makes it a little bit smoother when it actually goes into Tableau, like Nick was saying, and it, makes it a little bit faster and to load the different dashboards.
Any other things that are coming to mind about data prep, or other questions you've been thinking about, or sticking points with certain data sets in Tableau? I know, talking to my team, some of them just take more work than others to get them to work nicely in Tableau.
Yeah, when you guys clean data, are you doing the bulk of the work before it gets into Tableau, like in Excel or in Prep or in SQL? Or are you getting the dirty stuff into Tableau and then cleaning stuff up by like grouping or doing an alias or something like that? I do a little bit of both.
I'm gonna say I do both, but I try to do as much as I can before it gets to Tableau, just because if I want to use it for multiple dashboards, it's easier that way. Because and one thing I found the hard way when we lost our Tableau server is if you have to republish your stuff, then you do it all in the data source and you don't save it, you have to redo all of the grouping and all of the stuff. So it can be a lot of work. But so I try to do it before it gets into Tableau, but some stuff, I definitely do some grouping and aliasing in Tableau also.
Okay. I have another question. if I can get this thing to go to the next page. Aha. Oh, some people already put stuff in here. If you could offer one best practice or tip for designing dashboards, what would it be? Oh, this is where some people's, I must have been on this slide earlier before I got started. So here's some intros from people from earlier. Sorry about that. So this is the next prompt about dashboard design. And this came up, there were people asking about, in the last survey, best practices to create dashboards that really pull people in and make them want to go look at what you created. And also, how do you introduce and get your users familiar with what Tableau can do by how you design your dashboards? Like whether it's including like those information icons or taking screenshots, or how do you kind of embed that professional development and being able to pull some of that into your dashboards at the same time. Make it as simple as possible. Yeah. Adding instructions and explanations as text on the dashboard. Good one. I know our in Kent, it's not a struggle, but we've just been trying to find the balance between being too text heavy and calling out what needs to be called out. That's really important that we want somebody to take away from a dashboard. So it's a fine balance.
Yes, Baba. Yes.
Start at a simple high level, go deeper as they scroll down or go on to another page. Actually, you help them walk through it for the first time. Yes. You have a lot of filters on your dashboard. Use the show hide option. Yeah, I think talked about that a little bit at the last meeting to take up less space with filters, because sometimes you can be in filter overload. Use of info button to instruct on how to use the dashboard. Yeah. I think another piece is like consistency, like all the dashboards should look fairly similar. So once you know how to navigate one, you can navigate pretty much any of them. I know in Kent, we have a dashboard template that we use to start every dashboard so that there's some consistency in there. I don't know if that's the same for other districts as well. And then also you don't have to start from scratch with all of the little formatting pieces. Call out some directions using spacing, bold lettering, font size. I appreciate this will help them walk through it for the first time. I know we are always offering to meet with people and sit down virtually with them now to walk through dashboards before in person going out to schools and really being able to do that. One thing we're thinking about now is as we continue to scale and at some point release out to teachers. I mean, we have a couple thousand teachers, so we can't actually sit down with all of them and walk through it. So what does it look like to embed as much as we can on dashboards and provide other resources so that they know how to use them?
I had a funny experience just the other day, and Sheila who's hiding his N1 buoy. I shared it with her already, and that made this dashboard. I thought, oh, this is great. It's nice and visual. It's clear, and so and sent it out to a user, and they said, "Oh, Dave, man, this looks beautiful, but I broke it." I said, "You broke it? How could you break it?" And the issue was they didn't know to undo a filter. All you had to do was click it again. You know, it's just like, gosh, I think these things would be obvious, but you just never know what the user knows and doesn't know and what they're trying, because they swore they'd broken it. And I would have guessed that this particular user wouldn't have had any issues with any of the problem. You know, it was like, but that was the one thing. Oh, that's all?
And then the back, you're like, you broke it. Wait, no, like one thing I always tell people when I am sitting down with them is like, you can't break this. Like, you can't. You just.
Yeah, so what the suggestion should be was, well, put it in the info button that you click again to undo the filter. It's like, okay, yeah, why not? Got plenty of room.
You got to make sure they go to the info button, right? It's all like, I think the more you expose them and the consistency of that, then they know to go look and see what's in the info button. What do I need to do and all of that. So, yeah.
But also, even though we have thousands, you know, once they get used to some of these features that they're used to already, and they transition from pull down menus to ribbons in Microsoft, you know, they become more familiar with some of the main elements of Tableau.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, David, in that vein with the clicking to undo filters, every single time I'm giving anyone a demo, I always make sure that I say that, you're like, oh, we can click here and we'll filter by our second graders or whatever, right? And then it's like, if we want to undo that filter, you have to click on it again. You know, every single time you got to say it, because it's not actually all that intuitive, you know? So it is for us now, but, you know, for a newbie, they wouldn't know.
Especially if you're using the dashboard where you have multiple displays and you can click on one dashboard to filter another, those get really confusing for people.
Yeah, we always, and if you start clicking on multiple and then you don't know what you're looking at anymore, like you're like, wait a minute, how did the bars disappeared and there's like one person left? What am I looking at? And that's my advice on those is like, just refresh, just start over, you know, because and that's one thing too, like, especially when you have a lot of filters, like, how do you know what you're looking at and keep track of that? We'll put things in titles and have questions change if you have like pick a school or pick a group, but once you have a bunch of filters, like you kind of have to keep track of what it is that you're looking at. And I think that's where like tooltips comes in handy, where it's like, you have one student that you're looking at right now, or this is 5 students or whatever it is, to have that context of, oh wait, what am I looking at? Oh, I'm looking at, you know, this group of second graders that are below level and chronically absent, something else. So
I'm sure if Coleman sat in some user experience tests, he's seen plenty of has plenty of humor stories. You don't need to share them now, Coleman, but you just never know what a user's going to know and not know.
Yeah, there's definitely times where I'm working with customers and I say, hey, I'm going to do this little screen control thing where I can just grab control, and because it's easier than giving verbal instructions on what to do and how to do things. But yeah, there's a lot to Tableau, and there's lots of features that you may never even explore.
right, and some of them we just have to find the right use case for them, and they're not used everywhere. They're like, oh wait, we finally have the reason to use this thing. How are we going to make sure people know that it's there?
And then they don't care about the data anyways. Oh, but it's such a cool feature.
Yeah, how do I download this to a CSV? Yeah.
Basically, if I had $1 for every time I get asked if I could download this to Excel, I'd have a lot of money. Any other best practices or tips or anything you're thinking about in creating dashboards?
There's just so many now. It's really nice if you're not yet watching some of the other Tableau user groups that have gone online now. With so many, you get to see Coleman's presentation over and over, but that's all right. And so everybody's sharing the new things on Tableau. But every time I go to data analytics group or the Portland, which used to be the Seattle's now the Portland group, or other things, pick up people's tips and tricks, and I've kept them kind of stored in my bookmark. So there's so many helpful places out there. I can share my bookmarks if you contact me. Say, hey, what are the ones you're talking about? They're lit at about 14 to 24 that I have got bookmarked. There's just each and every one of them provides some new insights.
Yeah, like you were saying, there's so many options now with like the user groups being online and virtual. Like, oh, well, just hop into this one and see. Like, might not even be education related, but I might learn something from it. So, yeah, lots of resources out there.
And I had to jump out for a long time, but if you haven't been to the Tableau conference before, you probably didn't get the email recently from them that there's a Tableau Live event coming up that will have some interesting pieces and parts to it. And it's May something, but you can find it on their website as well. It'll be another kind of just live participate or see. They used to hold those in person in Washington. There were some good ones. I always like the food, but now I gotta supply my own food.
This is all on you. I just want to go to the last question we have on here, just so that we get it captured and maybe have a little bit of discussion. But it's about really reflecting on this year. And do you have any plans to survey students, families, and teachers about their experiences during the school year? So that could be your traditional climate surveys. Are you adapting them based on this last year? Have you been asked to do different surveys or collect data other ways based on just how this year has gone, and that we've had a remote portion and kids coming back to class and all of that? Just wondering what other districts are thinking about in terms of all of that right now. I know my teams are talking a lot about what we've been kind of branding quality of experience and what it's been like to be remote for over half of the year, but now also having different experiences in hybrid or remote. Like, as we've had to make staffing changes, you know, there are some really big hybrid classes, there are some really small hybrid classes, there's some really big remote classes. Like, how do those differ and what can we collect and look at? So we're thinking about questions like that. I'm just wondering what other districts are talking about. And we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to have something chime in and say, have that too. No, survey data is not a go-to for district or building leadership as a source of information here. We're going to do a preference survey, going out to see students' families' preferences in terms of staying remote versus going in person full time next year. Plan an experience survey. I mean, I also worry about survey fatigue. We've surveyed people so many times this year. I mean, we surveyed them 4 times, asking them if they wanted to come back or not. And then the last time we're like, no, really, this is the final one. Like, this is your choice. Like, is it really? Because you said something similar 3 times before. So if we are doing something else, being cognizant of time and what we're asking and how we're really going to use it. And we have been putting a lot of our survey results into dashboards on Tableau Public so that our community can see those results. And closing the loop there. So thinking about what that would look like for something that we do in the spring and closing out the year. But there have been a lot of surveys. And they're the ones that our team hasn't been a part of too, that you know, there's probably more than we know.
The only survey in Renton planned were 1-question surveys.
Like, are you coming back? Yes or no? See, now you've built up some credit to be like, we had a bunch of short ones. Here's a bigger one. Like, talk about the year.
No, mine, I answered in the blue box.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, when I saw this question, I was like, I don't even know if we can think about another survey right now. Just because we've had so many surveys and stuff. But I'm sure we'll probably do something at the end of the year. But right now, like, we had a bunch of delays in getting registration going for next year. So everybody's just so focused on registration that it's like, we're not even, like, we wouldn't be able to do anything with the data right now anyway. So I think if we did it, it would probably be in June or something.
Yeah, I think it would be similar for us, especially since like it was just 2 weeks ago that we even brought anybody back. So what would you really get at this point in time? Like, it would be something at the end of the year. We also have enrollment things going on too. We had boundary changes, so those have to be communicated out for next year and all of that. So it's kind of the next big thing happening. Well, we are at our time for today. It's Friday. It's not raining yet, so cognizant of that and appreciate you all for attending. I think we'll go through our normal process and send out another follow-up form, see what people are interested in talking about for next time, when that might be. Like 3 months from now is kind of the end of July, the beginning of August. No idea what things will be like at that point in time. So thinking about if we want to meet again before the school year starts, after it gets going, all of that. So we'll put out some options there. But otherwise, I appreciate the time and the discussion. Thanks again, Coleman and Alex, for sharing the pieces there. And we'll connect again soon. Thanks,
a lot.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.